you were on, and I used to be a big fan of Joe Rogan.
Sure.
I still watch a lot of his. I still watch a lot of his videos, but I wanted to talk to you specifically about being on Joe Rogan, the Joe Rogan experience, and like what you got out of that, because the number one issue, one of the unchangeable issues that Joe Rogan won't budge on is, other than like legalization of marijuana or whatever, is trans athletes, and I feel like it's really just. I think it has had a lasting impact on the way that people cover the story. Yeah. It's like a super adequate, super powerful way to traffic transphobic ideas. Not that people needed that anyway, because like, you could just be as transphobic as you want and people will still give you like hundreds of millions of dollars. Shouts out to Dave Chappelle. So I wanted to get feedback on your experience there, having a conversation with Joe Rogan, specifically around the trans stuff. And the backlash that you received as a consequence of that. And then we'll go into Bill Maher's new brave, bold, thought-provoking transphobic bit.
Look, I mean, this was like 3 years ago. He sprung that topic of conversation on me. It was not something that like I think I should be the representative of to talk about, because I was there. I was like, all right, I mean, I'll go to bat for what I think is right here as best I can. But, when the dude is like locked and loaded with like, Jamie pull that up shit of whatever pseudoscience he wants to bring up, you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't the best position to be in. And, honestly, in retrospect, like, you ever seen that clip of Bill Burr on Rogan where Bill Burr goes, Rogan is like...
talking about masks?
Talking about masks and vaccines. And
Burr's
like,
why do you
what the fuck are you doing, right?
Yeah.
That's the better move. In retrospect, I should have done that. But I was also like, I didn't know we'd be talking about this. You know what I mean?
When I do that, people get mad at me sometimes. Like, there's a lot of like debate lords that are on the internet that are like sock dem or like liberals, and they get like really upset whenever I have that conversation exactly on those terms, where I'm like, why do you fucking care about this? Like, can you tell me who the second place, cis loser was that lost to the trans person in this like random fucking regional swim meet? Like, no, you can't, because you don't give a fuck about it. You're just saying it because a trans person happened to win this one time, and they will probably get subsequently owned over and over again throughout their career, and you're never going to think about that ever again. We're not going to watch this whole thing. I'm just, this is just B-roll in the background. And people get mad at me, but like, that's the normal position. I think that the normal position is just like, you don't care about this. You're only acting like you care about this and making it seem like you care about the integrity of the sport somehow being compromised by trans people, like the 3 trans people that are like participating in it. And that's the unfortunate reality, is that like it dominates discourse.
The people who like create this issue have never been to a women's sporting event in their life. Like they don't give a shit about it. And so like they have generated like a false issue, Now look, when you're talking about whatever the swimmer is at Harvard, right? Am I right? Whatever. Like, and you're talking about like literally the people who are on the same team in that individual competition. Like, that's for the people in that community to figure out. It's fucking children's sports. Like, we can surely find an accommodation here that is going to like allow everyone to participate in sports and do whatever the fuck else you wanted to do. It's the inflation of it into a culture war issue that is ludicrous.
But what was the feedback? Like, you got a lot of backlash, right? Like, I mean, people are like they get really fucking agitated.
Oh yeah,
about this issue. Like, they make this out to be the most important, most significant thing. Is to like dunk on.
His fans came after me for a couple months after this. It was again a conversation that I did not go in intending to have. But it was just like beta cuck, just like you know, the very basic stuff. No one's actually like advancing an argument of any kind. No one actually cares about the issue at all. And I'll point out, like, I say to him multiple times, hey, you should talk to like an expert about this. You should talk to like somebody who knows what they're talking about. Like, I'm not sure why we're having this conversation, but it's because, he felt like using me as a punching bag in that moment,
The only experts he'll talk to about this are going to be experts that are not an actual expert in the field, and usually like random fucking evolutionary psychologists or whatever. Who got fired for saying the N-word over and over again or some shit from some like random liberal arts college that now have like a podcast that almost exclusively relies on being on Joe Rogan to stay afloat.
Here's the most disappointing thing to me about this interview was I was excited to do this interview because at the time Joe was not so directly associated with like the far right. Like he hadn't totally made that turn yet. He was saying shit like this, but I was like, okay, the guy's a comic, I'm a comic. We should be able to like, you know, do some have some galaxy brain fun together, you know? And so he starts talking about this shit. And I try to get him to like look at it with a bigger picture and say like, hey man, like sports are fucking social constructions. We made them up. And so we invented yes, there are differences between male and female biological, you know, born, whatever, assigned at birth male, assigned at birth female bodies. We designed sports such that the most popular ones are like designed for a male body. What if we didn't do that? Right? What if like, okay, like women's gymnastics, like men can't do that shit, right? Because there's et cetera. What if we invented fucking sports that we did not have a problem with this with, right? Because sports is just a fun thing to do. Sports are something that everyone should be able to participate in. So what if we invented some fucking less gendered sports? He was not willing to entertain that conversation. He was like, I was like, is this not interesting? And he wouldn't go there with me. So that's my biggest bummer about it was like, he was not really into the idea of having like an honest, he turned it immediately into a boxing match and I wanted to have a conversation. So all the backlash was like, oh, Rogan owned you. He won a debate against you. I was like, I thought I was having a conversation. Like, yeah. I thought I went on to just like talk about my show and like spitball shit because we're fucking comics. And he turned it into a fist fight, which that's what I don't like about it.
Well, women could have made them, but they didn't. Yeah, because they're too busy. Yeah. Not because of like the patriarchy or anything, but because like they're too busy in the kitchen loving making sandwiches to me as my braless wife. That's why. But no, it's just yeah, no, the reason why I said that is because like if you even support trans rights in any visible capacity on the internet, people will eat your ass in the fucking QRTs nonstop and tell you you're a cuck or a soy boy or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is always really funny when they say that to me because I'm like, come on, dude.
It sucks.
I mean, what do you look like?
it really sucks because, you know, when you get that amount of hate, it does make you think twice as like a public figure, right? Like I don't want people to hate on me. And then you have to go, hold on a second. This is like fucking gay rights in 1995, you know, like we need to fucking go to bat for this. Or like you're going to be on the wrong side of history, you know? And so what I do appreciate is that years later, people still come up to me and say, hey, thank you for like going to bat in that interview. You did the best you could. I'm like, thank you. I'm glad that, you know, that came through to some folks. But yeah, I mean, it's
how is this similar to gay rights? It's a targeted minority that's marginalized and being like the exact same arguments used towards gay people are now being used towards trans people. Gay people can't be in the locker room with other men because like they'll get too horny.
And by the way, those arguments are now being leveled against gay people again.
Yeah.
Like we're back there. We're fucking rolling back civil rights as we speak across the country. Turns out that's turned out to be a very powerful organizing weapon for the right.
I just always find it funny that Joe Rogan is a #1 advocate. And I used to be a huge fan of his. Like I've watched him. I've hung out with him before as well, like many, many years back. But I watched him for many years. He has always been a gigantic advocate of gender affirming surgery. As he is the #1, probably the most public, most vocal advocate of TRT, which is a form of hormone therapy that's gender affirming. He himself has done TRT throughout the years, maybe even HGH, and yet he turns around and is like, "Yeah, trans women, you know, you can't do that."
I mean, it's the craziest thing is the reason we started talking about trans athletes was I brought up the case of Caster Semenya. Do you know Caster Semenya?
Yes, the cis. Yeah, the cis woman who was barred from competing because her testosterone levels were too high.
Yeah, and like that's bullshit discrimination against a woman, against a black woman. She's like now barred from racing because the other racers said that it was unfair to compete against her. She's had no hormone replacement therapy of any kind. And Joe was like, yeah, that's bullshit. What do you think about trans athletes? And I was like, Well, I mean, for the same reason, like I don't think they should be excluded from sports, and that set him off. Which is like, I don't understand how you can understand why to be on the right side of one and the wrong side of the other. Personally, apart from fucking prejudice, like,
Yeah, no,
what else is it? Like, it's all an argument for prejudice.
People that have natural advantages, like Michael Phelps, or even like LeBron James, you know what I mean? Like people that have natural advantages beyond everything else is like. It's still, that's fine. That's cool. That's actually celebrated. But, anything else outside of that is unacceptable. I've talked about, I've made a comparison to Messi before. Like Messi had a genetic disability that he overcame by getting HGH and like numerous forms of hormone therapy. And he's one of the best athletes of all time. It's seen as like a story of overcoming like a great struggle, right? Great marginalization, and when a trans athlete is like even remotely successful, they're like, no, that's cheating.
Yeah. And like the thing that I've only come to realize recently, talking to my friend River Butcher, who's a really funny comic, trans man, really great person, explained this to me, that like women's sports leagues were created in order to ghettoize and subjugate women. That like there used to be a lot of cases in like the dawn of organized sports where you'd have women who were competitive with male athletes at baseball, sports like that. And like men would freak out, and then they banned women from the sports around the same time that they were fucking banning black people from sports. And so they created a second tier sports system to keep women out of sports. And they, again, created the sports in such a way that they benefited male bodies on average rather than female bodies on average. So when you're saying like, oh, we need to defend women's sports against trans athletes, you're saying we need to defend like a fucking caste system in sports, a tiered system that is subjugating women. What we should be doing is saying the entire system of male versus female sports is fucking prejudiced, and we should demolish the whole thing and come up with a system of sports that everybody can participate in, because sports are just a fucking part of life.
People will say that that's like discriminatory towards women, though, because then it's like, because all men will always dominate. That co-ed sport,
They
because
won't
like
if you
because of
develop
the
sports.
averages. Because of like I get it. I mean, I understand what you're saying.
Again, just using it as an example, women's gymnastics, right, is better than men's gymnastics, like as a sport. Like nobody gives a shit about men's gymnastics. Everyone knows that women's gymnastics is better. And like, it's not hard to, like, how would you take soccer, right? How would you adjust the rules of soccer very slightly in order to make it, build more gender parity into soccer? You could fucking do it. We made the sports up.
I know, but there's so much, like, there's so much tradition that people will refuse to do that. They'll say you're trying to game the system in a way that like it's worse, the outcomes are worse overall, because like co-ed automatically means worse, because as it stands currently, co-ed is worse, because these are sports, as you correctly pointed out, that have been tailored towards like the male physique and like more testosterone focused endeavors.
But all we need to do is like show people the counterexample. Like, yes, the tradition is there. It's long-standing. It's going to be a long time to fight for. But like, so is gay marriage. So is everything else. And we need to like show and normalize in order to get out of this trap, because sports as it is now is a trap that is like designed to subjugate women and trans people. Like, just, it's like a fucking honeypot for bullshit arguments. And so we need to stop trying to go like, how will we adjust the NBA or whatever, or like the WNBA to account for trans athletes, and start saying, what are the models that would like actually result in an equitable sports system overall, and like demonstrate it to people. I think a really good example, honestly, is fucking wrestling. Like pro wrestling is like, they now have like really healthy women's divisions, and they don't seem that far away from just like, let's just fucking let the men and women wrestle each other. It's all theater anyway. Let's just do it. It'll be great, And
well, I mean, but that is theater, though. I mean, there's like a profound amount of physicality, like physical excellence required, but it is like still literally wrestling. Whereas sports in the way that it currently works is supposed to like bring out the best in a particular subject. But that's part of the reason why I don't have a problem with trans athletes, is that like they're already overcoming profound amount of struggle by coming out as trans, and then also they're working against their hormones that like simultaneously are quite literally shrinking their muscle mass.
What's bizarre is that when a cis athlete goes through any sort of adversity, like you say, they're like lauded, like fucking Lance Armstrong's missing a ball and people are like, wow, incredible. But when a different athlete has, their own challenges, they're always told it's an advantage. Like the fucking, what's the name of Oscar Pistorius, the guy who eventually shot his girlfriend.
Yeah.
Before that, he's the guy with, I believe, no legs below the knee, and he had the spring things, and people were ludicrously saying that gave him an advantage when the result. The guy has springs for legs. He doesn't have muscles. Muscles like are an anti-entropic system. You energy comes out of them and makes you go faster. He was using springs, which lose energy with every bounce. It's like literally, as a matter of thermodynamics, not an advantage. But people were saying that this guy shouldn't be allowed to race. And guess what? They did let him race, and he never got close to winning. And it was, and then unfortunately he shot his girlfriend, which is, he murdered her, which is a different part of the story.
Unrelated to the topic at hand.
Like, it's crazy how sports are such a fucking hegemonic like force that as soon as you try to be slightly outside of the mainstream, you're ejected, you're told you have an advantage. And like we should be seeing all these examples, castrosomania, trans athletes, as like part of the same struggle for like inclusion in sports. And we also need to ask ourselves, what's more important to us? Like having some sort of objective thing of like who won, or including everybody in society in this fundamental part of human activity. And I think it's the latter. I don't really give a shit. Like I want to see who wins for fun. It's not like important on a cosmic level that like the best person win. It's important on a cosmic level that we include everybody who wants to participate. And like, so what is your value at the end of the day?
I agree, but I also don't really give a shit about sports. So everyone will literally be like, dude, fuck off. You don't care about sports. Like you're. So I do see the other side's argument in that situation where they're like, you're ruining something that is like near and dear to me and important to me.
But why?
But it's made up. It's made up to begin with. But it's that area is one that I personally believe is like impossible to change. Other than just like allowing trans women to compete with cis women, like I don't give a fuck. I think that's ridiculous to like hyper focus on trans women.
Look, yes, it's gonna be very difficult to reform sports. At the very least, we can stop getting sucked into this bullshit trap of an argument about like, oh, what division should they be in? We should be able to point out that like the entire division is built to like exclude and subjugate people, and that's what we should be working to end.
Yeah.
Go follow River Butcher on Twitter and buy his albums. He's a really great stand-up comic who I mentioned earlier.
Yeah. There was another thing I wanted to show you. We looked at Dave Rubin. We looked at baby formula. We looked